All right, today I'm starting with a black Frederick's Red Label canvas, 12 by 16. I have not prepared this in any way. It's fresh out of the package. And what I'm going to do first is grid my image. So here's the reference image that I'll be using. And I've got a 1-inch grid applied to it. If you're also going to be painting on a 12 by 16 inch, you can download this image for free off of my website. There's a link in the video description below. Now, if you want to do this on a different size canvas, then the link to my blog post is also in the video description below, and that will show you how to apply a grid to any image for any size of canvas that you like. So make sure you check that out. So I'm just going to go through here and mark off a 1-inch grid on my entire canvas. All right, now I've got my image and I've got it on my phone here. And what I'm going to do is, I think because this is kind of a more complex image than what we've done in the past, I'm going to go through square by square. I'm going to start up here and just kind of fill in wherever I see little bits in the square, rather than just kind of starting in the middle and, you know, going out from there. Now this is a little bit of a process, and it's a process you want to be patient with. Don't try to rush this and do it fast, you know? Take as long as you need to get it done the right way. So again, I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this because it may take me 20-30 minutes to get through this whole image. So I'll kind of cut out a little bit here and there. But notice how I'm just kind of going across. That helps prevent me from getting lost too, because in an image like this, it can be easy to get lost. You know, if I start in the middle and work out, I have to be counting, you know, and always making sure that I'm in the right place. But here, I know I'm in the right place because it's the only place I'm working on at the moment. So just put on some good music that you like and, you know, enjoy the process. All right, there is my rose all sketched out. And I think it took me, with all the little corrections I had to make, roughly about 30 minutes. So not too bad. Now we can go ahead and start painting. So to start painting this in, I think I'm going to start with my 1/2-inch filbert. I may end up changing it, but we'll start with this and see how it goes. So I did wet this in my jar and then very lightly tapped it on a paper towel. And I've got some Cad Red Medium and Quinacridone Magenta and a little bit of matte medium just for blending. I like to blend with it. It's not required for this painting. So I'm just going to decide where on my flower I want to start. Unlike with the gridding, I don't have to start at the top and work my way down. So I think I'm actually going to start right here in the middle. For the most part, I'm going to be mixing these colors about even, but if you look at our reference image, there's areas where the red is a little bit cooler. So that would be a little bit more quinacridone. And areas that are a little warmer, that would be a little bit more Cad Red Medium. So I'm going to start with that color. It's a good mixture of the two. And I'm going to come right here into the middle and just kind of start filling this in. This is obviously not my final color. it's just going to get us started. So right along that edge, define that shape, pull it down, and keep an eye on your image to see where your shadows are. Use the black of the canvas to your advantage. I just picked up a little matte medium, and that's going to help me kind of streak this color out. Look at that. Now I don't have to work for that shadow. I just use some matte medium, and the black of the canvas creates the shadow for me. Let's keep going with that. A little more of my colors. Doesn't matter if it leans more one way or the other. Let's start filling in over here. I left a hint of that line between the two showing. But another thing you can do so that you can keep track of, what is what petal, is just make the colors a little bit different. So, if you have two petals that are right up against each other and there's not really a shadow separating the colors, make one of them a little bit warmer and one of them a little bit cooler. Just kind of follow your image and start laying that color in wherever you see it. Don't worry about the nuances, like if there's a little divot in the flower, or if you can see the veins of the flower, or any of that. Just look at the overall color. You see, I'm just kind of lightly dusting that out right there. If you accidentally take away too much of your shadow, don't worry about that. That's going to be really easy to put back in later. Actually, I'm going to get a good amount of matte medium here because right up in here, it's very, very dark. So I just want to lay down a suggestion of this color right in there. Just kind of suggesting it. Very dark. And then it'll be a little bit brighter right there. Just dust them together. Don't worry about brush marks. Nothing like that. A little bit of a bright spot on the centerpiece there. I just picked up a little bit more of the orange there, not really any of the quinacridone. Keep an eye on your reference image. You can erase your grid lines if you like, but I find that they're actually really helpful here. Because sometimes I might kind of get lost and not be able to tell the difference between one line and another, but if my grid is there, then that makes it a lot easier. A little matte medium, suggest some of that color in there. I like to use the filbert for this because it's a nice soft shape, with the rounded end, but I can still get a hard line by using the edge of the brush. See how I can still get a nice crisp line there? But it's good for blending as well. This would be really fun to do in, any colors you like. I considered yellow because I think yellow roses are fun, and yellow is my favorite color, so I thought about doing yellow, but I know that yellow can be tricky to work with sometimes, so I didn't go with the yellow. even, you know what could be really cool is like sepia. So kind of a blackish, like a grayish brown. Little matte medium. If you're getting really long brush strokes like that, just shorten your brush stroke, because I think that it shows a little less when there's short little brush strokes rather than a big long one that goes from one side of the shape to the other. That's really obvious when you have brush strokes like that. Now, one thing you'll notice is as this dries, it appears to get darker. Now, that's because quinacridone is transparent and we're painting on top of a black canvas. So as the quinacridone dries and goes a little more transparent, it's showing the black through it a bit more. The cadmium red is more opaque, so that's why we're not just getting a completely transparent color. But as we layer, as we start working on the details later, the color will become more opaque. So please don't sweat that right now. This is really just us getting an idea of where our brightest colors are going to be, what's going to be shadow, you know, everything like that. And I forgot a little line right there. And my flower might end up being a little bit different than the one that I drew it from, but that's okay, because we're using the reference as, you know, just that, a reference. It doesn't mean that we have to copy it exactly. You can use a reference and then end up making it completely different. Just because you use a reference doesn't mean your painting has to look exactly like that reference. I think this can be a really calming and relaxing painting to do. Kind of like the geode or the cactus, you know, it's a little bit like a mandala. How it everything kind of spirals in toward the center. So think about your association with roses. What does it make you think of? I have a lot of associations with roses. It was my great-grandmother's name. And we always had rose bushes growing in our yard when I was growing up. I love rose perfume. Not actually a huge fan of the plants in my yard. They tend to kind of get out of control, you know, if you don't keep them cut back. And I don't garden well, so that means that rose bushes under my care never get cut back. I'm too busy to garden. And even when I'm not too busy to garden, I just don't do it. So see how I'm making that edge there where it's nice and bright? Little matte medium, kind of smear it out, and I deposit a little bit more color. But it's nice and transparent. And it doesn't actually look like I'm going to have too much trouble with that chalk showing maybe a little bit here and there. But like I said, if you're doing this, please use a color that you can see, but maybe just barely. You don't have to use these bright colors like I used. I just did that for your benefit so you could see what I was doing. I think I'm going to go a little bit warmer on this. I pulled a little bit more cad red into that for right here because I don't want that piece to get lost. Matte medium, and blend it out. Remember that matte medium is white when it's wet, so don't worry if your color looks opaque or if it looks like it got lighter, like pink. As it dries, that will go away. This is one of those paintings that you could do, you know, that you could spend as much time as you want on. You can make it very simple if you like. You know, just get your main color in there, maybe kick in a couple of shadows, a couple of highlights, and call it good. Or you can really drill down into the details and, you know, pump them up. Give it lots and lots of layers and character. I don't think I'm going to go too crazy with the layers this time. I'm not going to make it ultra simple. I'm just not going to get crazy and, you know, do 85 layers. But you absolutely could. If you find at any time while you're painting this in that you're getting lost and you can't tell, you know, what is what petal, what's curving outward, what's going into shadow, just you can't tell what's what, or you feel like you're afraid that that's going to start happening, then stop what you're doing. Like if that's right here and you're like, okay, I can't continue on. Stop what you're doing. Go ahead and do all of your highlights and your shadows. Finish up the areas that you've started so that they're all identifiable as the individual bits, and then continue on. This is pretty dark down in here. In fact, I'm going to get a little matte medium. Just suggest that color in there. All across here. A little more cad red. And let's punch this edge, make it nice and bright. It's the contrast in this painting that's going to make it effective. You know, the shadows and the highlights. So don't worry about your color. Seriously, don't worry, you know, that it's too warm or it's too cool or anything like that. Worry about your shadows and your highlights, because that's what's going to make this an impressive painting. And we're not going to use this brush for the whole thing. And if at any time you feel like it's just too large of a brush for you to use while you're doing this, switch to a smaller brush. You can use any brush you like. All right, this part of my image is super dark, so I just picked up some matte medium and I'm just gonna smooth that back. It goes almost about to pure black right in here. I'm just gonna zoom me out there all the way while I finish this up. I'm really gonna be doing this whole thing the exact same. Nice crisp edge up there at the top. A little matte medium and a little extra quinacridone. Just to start reminding myself there's a shadow there. I am really just leaving a bit of a black line in between a lot of these. Once we come in with a smaller brush and start doing the details, we'll fill all that in. We are super bright right here. This is kind of where a petal is folded over forward. So it's bright on the front and the back. This is the area where I kind of got lost while I was drawing it. So it might actually be a little different than the reference image, and that's okay. I'm not gonna sweat that. You know what might else be fun? Is if you do your painting, if you've seen those photos of the roses that are all different colors, like it's rainbow around. That could be really fun too. That would definitely be a little bit more of a challenge because, like I said, you really want to make sure that your values are correct. Other than your values, it really doesn't matter. So if you're going to do a lot of bright colors, just need to make sure that your shadows all over the image agree with each other no matter what color they are, and that your highlights agree with each other no matter what color they are. And that can be a little bit challenging if it's not a concept that you're used to dealing with. So painting in black and white can help with that. If you wanted to do like the rainbow effect, paint your whole flower in black and white. We're gonna let that taper out because it goes to pretty much black right there. Paint your whole flower in black and white, and then afterwards use some glazing medium and glaze your colors gently over top of it. Very, very thin, very thin. And that way the black and white will still show. You'll keep all of your values, but you'll get your colors on there. This is pretty dark right over here. And then it gets a little bit brighter as it comes forward here. But all inside in here and here is pretty much black. Matte medium, smooth that out. And I can still see, obviously, all of my grid lines in there. I'm not worried about that right now. So if you can, please don't stress that, because I think if you stress it and you try and go in and take it out right now, you're just gonna waste your time because it's not gonna be a big deal. And those grid lines might come in handy, so just leave them for now. Do have a bit of that color just kind of dark right in here. So I guess this would be a good painting for Valentine's Day. Being that it's about Valentine's Day as of today, when I'm doing this painting. I don't really do Valentine's Day, but this would be a nice painting for someone that you love. I think after I get all of this color on here, my base colors, I think I'm gonna take a break from my painting because, you know, like I said, my whole year, this year, I want to focus on being a little bit more meditative with what I do. I'm not gonna pressure myself so much, which is why we didn't have a painting last week. I worked on a few things, but nothing really felt right. And then my week got busy, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to really dedicate to it. And so I ended up saying, you know what, it's okay, because I want to, make sure that I really like a painting that I'm putting out. I would rather not rush something and just put something out. I'd rather just not have a video that week than rush something out to you. So that's why we didn't have a video last week. And, on this one, like I said in the Buddha, how I usually have to kind of take breaks. When I switch gears, I kind of have to stop and take a break. And a lot of times that break lasts for a whole day. Well, I sketched out, I did my grid, and then I sketched out the flower on here, and that was all almost an hour's work. Not quite an hour, about 45 minutes maybe, but it was a lot of work. And then painting in this underpainting part is another area that's a bit of work. And I want to be fresh when we start doing the highlights. I want to be able to really dig into that and enjoy it and kind of lose myself in it. But after I've been working for, you know, about 2 hours now, I'm just not, I can't be fresh in drilling down into little details. So I will have to take a break. And when I come back to work on this again, it will probably be tomorrow. So those of you who, you know, I hear all the time, I wish I had time to paint. I try, but life just gets so busy. Do what you can in little increments. I think sometimes when we feel like we don't have time, we pick super simple paintings so that we can try and get it done all in one sitting. But then we try and get it done all in one sitting, and that might still be a tall order for the amount of time that we have. So then we end up rushing through it, and then we get frustrated because a very simple painting ended up being, you know, difficult and frustrating. So if you don't have very much time to paint, then I'm going to encourage you to choose a little bit more of a challenging painting, a painting that is going to take a lot more time, and then work on it in little increments. You know, maybe if you don't have a lot of time, just sketch or do your grid. Put your grid on your canvas, and that's what you did for the night for your painting. The next day, start sketching the flower into the grid. And you don't have to do that all in one sitting. Do however much you have time for. You know, set a timer for 25 minutes and just sketch in the flower for that 25 minutes. And do that until it's all sketched in, however many days that takes you. It's okay if it takes you more than one day. And then do the same thing for the rest of the painting. Come in and, you know, start filling in your base color like what I'm doing. Set a timer for 25 minutes and just start painting in your base color. Once your timer goes off, be done for the night. And it might take you a little while to get that painting done, but it's going to be a painting that you look forward to doing because you're seeing the progress come along and you're turning that painting into a little bit of time that's dedicated just to you. And I think you'll look forward to it more rather than, you know, if you're doing small, simple ones to try and fill in that little bit of time you have, then every time you sit down to paint, you have to decide, what am I going to paint today? And that takes up some of your time. So don't do that. Let this painting take you, you know, a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever. But don't rush through it. Enjoy every single moment of it. That kind of fades right there a little bit. See, I kind of lost my shadow in here. This area is quite dark in my reference image, but that's okay. Because like I said, it is going to dry darker, but we can come back and add our shadows in. And that part's really going to be quite easy, especially since we've already got the shadows started with the black of the canvas. We are almost done here for the day, and then we'll take a little bit of a break, come back when we're fresh, and get those details going. Just a hint of that color right in here. And I think we're gonna be done for the day. So when I come back, this is gonna be completely dry and we'll start working on our shadows and highlights. All right, it is the next day and we are ready to start in on some of the highlights and shadows to really start giving some life to our flower. So I'm going to stick with the same colors as yesterday, and today I'm going to move down to my number 8 filbert. I wet this in my jar a little, and I think I'm going to start right here, right in the center. Now if you look at our reference image, toward the bottom of that shape is quite dark. We are going to focus on creating dark with the quinacridone, because the cool tone of the quinacridone is going to say shadow. The very tippy point of it is brighter, and we're going to say bright, and highlight is created with the cadmium red because it's warmer, so that says that it's taking more light. So I've got a little more matte medium. Again, matte medium is optional. You do not have to use it. I'm going to keep a mixture of both of my colors. However, I'm going to go stronger in the quinacridone for the highlight point. And just a little bit of matte medium. And I can start covering up those chalk lines now. So we'll get the shape done up really good. Make sure our edge is nice and crisp. And can you see the pressure that I'm using here? See how my brush isn't really bending? That's helping me kind of dust those colors together. See, my brush is not getting pressed flat. Let's get a little more quinacridone because we're starting to move into a bit more of a shadowy area. It's a little bit shadowy right here, so we'll cool it off a little bit. Let's cool it off even more. So this mixture is mostly quinacridone at this point. And so I can't really go any more quinacridone there because it's not really going to make much of a difference. So to get down into this darker shadow area, I'm just going to pick up some matte medium and make my color very transparent here. Then when we come back later to kick our shadows deeper, we'll make sure that that is as dark as we want it. This color here is about the same color as what we have here, so I'm just going to continue that here. I didn't even pick up any more paint or matte medium. Still what I was using right there at the bottom of that first shape. So we'll make sure this is filled in nicely. That is really dark right there in the back. Almost black in our reference image. And also from here, I am using my reference image. However, I'm going to make decisions based on what I want to see. So there's an area in my photo that's in dark shadow. If I decide that I want it in a brighter light, then I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can absolutely make changes however you see fit. Brighten up the edge of this flower a little. Nice bright edge there. A little more quinacridone as we move down. Matte medium. My warmer color for this edge. Yeah, and I've decided I am going to have to come back with a brighter color to really make sure that my highlights are nice and intense. But just like the Buddha, it's all building our layers toward the final look that we want. So remember when we were painting the back, well, the base color for the flowers, I told you to, you know, kind of use the painting as some you time, and maybe then you'll look forward to it more, you know, even if it's taking you a lot more time than normal. And so I found myself thinking about this painting ever since I stopped painting yesterday, and really looking forward to getting back to it today. And that's exactly what I was talking about, you know, find a way that you can really make yourself look forward to it. Let's just keep going with this. And I think in a minute I will come back, just getting quite a warm color here. In a minute I will come back and we'll just kind of play with the highlights there and see what we can do. Maybe we won't wait until we're done with this before we start going back into the highlights. Keep your reference image handy. I know sometimes you guys want me to keep either the finished painting or the reference image on the screen, but again, it's not always possible. There's not always room, you know, especially like in a scrunched area like we're doing here where we're zoomed in. There's not a lot of room without kind of taking away your view of how this area I'm working on is working with everything else. But also, when I work in layers, sometimes that might get confusing. If, you know, what I'm doing doesn't seem to agree with the finished piece, you might get confused. So just make sure you download the reference image that I provided for you. I've put in the video description both the link to the image the way I've edited it, because I did crop it so that it would fit my canvas, and then I provided the version of it with the grid on it. But if you want a version that is not cropped, it's the original image, I provided the link to Graphic Stock where I got that as well. And that way you can, you know, grid it your own way, or if you don't want to grid it, you can do whatever you like. That, I feel like I have it a little too dark in there. It's not that dark on my image right up there. Over here, it's getting darker, and down in there, it's very dark. So we'll leave that. See how I had a lot of brush stroke marks in that area, but because I let it dry, when I go over it again, it takes care of it. So, you know, if you've got some brush stroke marks that you're not liking as you go along, I think just leave it. Don't worry about it, because you can spend a lot of time trying to get rid of brush stroke marks only to, you know, kind of frustrate yourself or make them worse or overblend your color. Or you can just leave it and deal with it later, which I think is the easy thing. I Nice dark area here, so I lean heavier on the quinacridone. A little more of my cad red because the edge here transitions down around into this shape where it's nice and bright. See how those dashes, just kind of dashing in different directions. It gives us a nice blend and it helps eliminate brush strokes. Brush stroke marks are something that I hear a lot about. A lot of you guys get really unhappy when you've got marks showing your brush strokes. So that's a way you can get rid of it. Another thing you can do is just not worry about it. You know, your painting was created with a paintbrush, so it's okay if it looks like it was created with a paintbrush. Brush stroke marks are okay. Pull that warm color farther down. Get right up in there to where those chalk lines are. Time to get rid of those. I think that quinacridone and this cad red medium, they make such a beautiful color. It's one of my favorite color mixtures. I know it seems kind of red, kind of weird to mix two reds together, but they make the most perfect color. Kind of like mixing ultramarine with phthalo blue. You get the most perfect blue. Filbert may not be your brush of choice for this part. If you'd rather use some other kind of brush, some other shape, that is perfectly fine. The reason I chose the filbert is, you know, my ability to get a nice sharp edge, like I showed you when we were filling it in before, but also because it's wide, so I can get a lot of coverage and it blends really well. So for me, this was really the obvious choice for this painting. But, you know, everybody has their preferences, so feel free to use whatever brush is the most comfortable for you. I used to not use filberts at all. I didn't understand why you'd want a brush that was rounded on the end but also flat. That just didn't make sense to me. But then as soon as I started using them, they quickly became my favorite. Now I just love filberts. They're not great for everything, obviously, but what they're good for, they are really good for. See, just kind of getting a nice gradient there from my brighter, warmer color to my cooler, darker color. And it's really, the quinacridone is really not all that much darker. It's a little darker than the cadmium, but again, it's that blue tone that helps it feel like a shadow. If that's confusing to you, you know, being able to tell which one is a blue or a warm or a cool tone, then you should check out this video that I made a while ago where we talk about color bias, and I give you a quick little way that you can kind of determine which one is cool and which one is warm. And really it's relative. You know, quinacridone may look warmer next to some other color. It may appear to be a warm color, so it's really relative. Next to this cadmium red, the quinacridone is quite cool. And see how that warm edge here next to the cool of the quinacridone there helps kind of push this into the back. And we are going to amp that up a little bit more later on. This isn't a painting that you can really mess up. So please, you know, if you're going along and you don't like something that you just did, please don't sweat it. Because you can come back and you can fix, you can change anything, absolutely anything. This is a painting that I've been working on for a little while now, probably a few months, not solidly, but you know, the first time I messed with it was a couple months ago, and I felt like I was almost there with it, almost to a point where I was going to be able to, you know, share it with you, and then I'd go to finish it up and it wouldn't quite work out. So, you know, you take breaks from things, you come back to them later. But I think I figured out this time what it was that I wasn't liking about it when I was working on it before, and it was because I was working on a white canvas. I felt like the white canvas made me work too hard for it, for those shadows. And the shadows, I feel like, need to kind of build themselves for this painting to be as satisfying as I wanted it to be. So the black canvas was perfect for that. Let's take a break from that for just a minute and work on kind of kicking our shadows in a bit. So I have some deep violet, and I've cleaned off my brush. Let's load up with that. I thought about going with Diox, but Diox is much more of a blue base purple, and I feel like it would clash with the Cad Red. You know, purple already is kind of blue base, so that's going to help it be a shadow, but I like the deep violet because it's a little bit warmer of a color, so I feel like it works well with the red. See, just dusting it ever so lightly, barely dusting it. And another great thing about this deep violet is it's very transparent, so I really don't even need to use matte medium here. See how nice and deep that shadow got? I'm going to end up taking my shadows a little bit darker than in my reference image because I really like that contrast. Just barely dust that up through there. I'm going to pull you in a little tighter there so that you can really see the pressure that I'm using. So right here is quite dark, so I'm going to cut a pretty sharp line there. Lay in that dark color pretty heavy there, so I'm using about full pressure there to put that in. But then to blend it, do you see that? See how my brush is just the very, very, very tippy point of the brush. And I can pull it out quite far if I need to. A little heavier there, just to cover up some of that lighter color. See how I'm able to kind of glaze this purple over top of the cad red, and it works, and that's why I chose this one instead of Diox. If you don't have this purple and you want to try Diox, by all means go for it. Another thing you can do, if you don't have deep violet, mix some quinacridone with ultramarine. That's going to give you a color pretty close, and keep it a little bit more on the on the quinacridone side of the color. But quinacridone and ultramarine will give you a pretty similar violet color. See, very light pressure. Let's get right in there and get rid of that chalk line. This petal that I'm working on, which is, you know, right here all the way down to right here, I'm going to finish that, and then we'll mess around with the highlights, see what we can do there. I am going to use just a little matte medium here because it helps me blend. Gets rid of that canvas texture. My brush is getting a little dry, so the matte medium helps. And just a hint of it down here. This area is not quite as dark. All right, let's go ahead and add some bright, bright highlights there, because right now it's looking a little dark and we don't want it to be quite that dark. Now, I know sometimes when you want to make a bright highlight, you instinctively go for white, mix some white into it. But I've found that with quinacridone in particular, white makes it very dull, kind of chalky looking, and it's not going to make it brighter. It'll make it lighter, but not brighter, and we want bright. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go down to my number 3 round brush, by the way, while I do these little details. I'm going to grab some of my cad red medium here, and I'm going to bring it over here to some cad orange. I know that that seems kind of strange, but it's going to look good. I'm going to mix some about 50-50, maybe a little bit more on the cad red side, because I don't want, you know, straight up orange. I put a little bit of matte medium in there to thin it down a bit, roll a good amount of that paint off. I don't want my brush gunked with paint. Obviously my colors are going to look a little different than the colors in the image, but that's fine because this is my painting. I'm going to come across the edge here where I want that edge to be nice and bright. Very little pressure. Take that color down the edge here. We'll take a bit of it kind of back here. Kind of scumble it a little bit. Don't be afraid to get your fingers in there to, you know, kind of wipe the color around as you need to. Nice and bright right there next to that super dark area. Can even come in and get just a little bit more of the cad red by itself. to kind of help ease that transition, or use matte medium or something. I'll just get a hint of it going in here, kind of dashing it on, making sure my line is nice and crisp. And I think I will grab a little point of matte medium, because that just helps me smooth that color out, blend it, break it up, fade it out. And I can even come in and grab a little point of quinacridone. So don't be afraid to just go back and forth. It's looking much better. Much more like what I wanted. Keep that mixture going. Remember that the edges of these petals are nice and bright. Bright, bright, bright. So just like with the Buddha, where I said we could really get lost in our highlights and, you know, spend days and days and weeks on them. I kind of feel like that's how this one is for me. But I will do my best not to spend days and days and weeks on highlights in here. Just picking up some of that cad red. Use that orange sparingly, you know. I don't want to turn my flower orange, but it's a nice highlight color for red. A little matte medium, just to smooth out canvas texture marks. So much better. As soon as I'm done with these little interior spots here, I'll zoom you out so you can see how that's working with everything else. Let's get in here. This point is going to be nice and bright. On matte medium, just dash it in there and very lightly smooth it with my finger. It's not quite as bright back here, so I just picked up a little of the cad red on its own. Back to my number 8 filbert and my deep violet. Oh, my deep violet's drying out a little, so I threw a little matte medium in there. All right, this area you can still see my grid and the black. Let's get rid of that chalk line there. Get right up to it. And start filling in this whole area. Good amount of pressure to lay that paint down. And then just up on the tippy toe of my brush to dash it in. Remember that when this deep violet is wet, you're going to be able to see it in the dark areas a lot more. It's going to look lighter than it is. It's going to look much more purple. But when it dries and that transparency kicks in, it won't appear quite so purple. It'll be just much more of a dark color. So I'm kind of looking at my reference photo now, but for the most part, I'm adding the shadows and the highlights where I feel like I want to see them. You know, I'm not so worried about doing it just like the photo. I do want to make sure that it's super dark right here, because I have my lightest value right here on the edge of that petal. So if it's super dark behind it, that's going to really make it pop and stand out. So that's another way that you can make something appear brighter. If you're having a really hard time getting a color to be as bright as you want it to appear, put something super dark right next to it. That's going to make it much brighter. So same right here. I want this petal here at the tip to be very, very bright. So I'm going to go quite dark right in here. And I'm still just using that deep violet. Actually, I'm going to pick up a little matte medium, mix that in with my deep violet. I'm going to make this part, the deep violet, just a little more transparent here. I want to give a hint of that shadow, but I don't want it to be terribly dark right here. I'm going to go very, very dark in here. So a heavy amount of that deep violet right up against the edge of this petal. Yeah, I've got this spot here that I'm working on much darker in my image than in the reference image. And I think that's okay. I like a lot of contrast. Make sure to cover up all your chalk lines here. So see how I did some of the shadows and then some of the highlights and then moved on to another area. So if you're doing this painting and you only have small amounts of time, do the same thing. Just work in little areas. Finish one area up so you feel nice and accomplished, and then be done for the day. Just taking a bit of that deep violet in here, right along this edge. And see how that really opened it up here between these two petals. Just adding that little hint of a shadow there. We'll matte medium to smooth it out. And that really kind of set those petals off of each other. I know it's still kind of weird right up in here. Let's just get a heavy amount of that purple, kind of cover up that little spot for now. Little matte medium to blend. Back to my number 3 and my cad red, cad orange mixture. Roll some of it off. Don't want big globs of paint. And let's start popping these edges. So we have a nice bright edge right here. Kind of tapers out as it goes over here because it's getting a little closer to the shadow. And break that up a little so we don't have a hard line. Just kind of scumbling over it a little bit. Barely touching though. My brush isn't really bending. Same color with just a hint more of the cad red in there. This part's taking a little bit more light because it's kind of bent over. So I'm just going to scumble some of that in there, soften the edges with my finger. Really feel like that's starting to come to life now. I am actually going to zoom it in here so you can see exactly how I'm doing that little scumbling. All right, so on this edge, I'm going to take my color. See, my brush is barely, it's barely touching. Hopefully that's focusing on my painting and not on the back of my hand. And then to bring it down in here, see that's just the tip of the brush. I'm almost just like scribbling in little bits. See that? Wipe out any hard lines with the tip of my finger. Define that edge as it comes down here, and you can't see that, so I'll stop there. And just lightly, see I'm depositing almost no paint, but it's enough to give the indication of that highlighted color. There's a lot of paint on my brush, so if I put heavy pressure, I'm really just going to paint this entire petal orange. And I don't want to do that. I think that's probably good right about there for that one. This one right below it doesn't actually have a lot of highlight on it. It's pretty dark. Just to find that edge. Scumble out that line ever so slightly, just so it's not a hard, crisp line. We can bring a little hint of highlight in there. And just picked up just a little bit of that cad red on its own. Lay it in there and kind of smooth that. I just felt like it was too dark in there. A little matte medium, get rid of that texture. I think the important thing here is just knowing which of your colors are transparent, which are opaque. Because that way, if you get something that you don't like that, I can pick up my transparent color. This is quinacridone. And right now it might look opaque, but as it dries, that color will glow through. It just won't be as intense as it was. And I didn't brighten up my edge here. I do want to make sure that this edge is nice and bright. So I said you want to make sure that you know which colors are transparent and which ones are opaque. And in this painting, my highlight colors are opaque. So my oranges are going to cover anything. My shadow colors, the quinacridone and the violet, so the purple colors, are transparent. Whenever your color starts to dry out just a little bit and you can't get that fresh line, either pick up a little matte medium if that's what you're using, or a little water if that's what you're using. Still just kind of punching some of this brighter color here and there. Little cad red with a little bit of matte medium. I just want to blend out this line a bit. See my brush again, it's not bending. I'm just kind of scratching over that line. And then I'm going to get a little point of quinacridone, just kind of tap it into my brush there. And same thing, I'm just kind of dashing over that cad red area. All right, let's keep going. I've got that little chalk area there. Just making sure that is completely filled in. I feel like maybe even more than the Buddha painting, this painting is about patience. Just picked up some cad red. Over here it's darker, so I don't feel like I'd have that bright orangey highlight. The cad red makes a nice highlight there too. So, you know, while this painting is a little bit more involved than some of our other paintings that we've done, I feel like it's still not any more difficult. If you can be patient with yourself, then you can do this painting. But if you come running into it and just slapping colors around and, you know, forcing yourself to get it done in 20 minutes or an hour or 3 days or whatever is too quick for you to finish this painting, then you'll be frustrated. But taking the time that you need to do it is what's going to make you successful. Just scumble that in there a bit. Little cad red. I'm not cleaning off my brush, by the way, in between these color changes. Not unless I'm going to make a huge change where I need a really pure color. And if I clean off my brush, I'll let you know. For right now, I am not cleaning off my brush. Nice and bright right here. We're a little dark there, and so that transition's hard. If you try to go too light into too dark, then sometimes you might struggle. So if that happens, clean off your brush. Now I'm going to get my cad red quinacridone mixture, a little heavier on the quinacridone. There we go. See how that just kind of helps bridge the gap between those two colors, that dark, dark shadow color, and then my lighter highlight color. I'm even going to keep that color going for a minute because I feel like it's just a little darker than I want right through here. So still just kind of scumbling. Just the quinacridone and the cad red. So much of what I'm doing here is just making choices as it presents itself. So if your painting doesn't look too dark right here, don't scumble this color in. This is just what I feel like I need right here. All right, kicking in some of those shadows again, little deep violet. And we'll take that right along here. Always a little matte medium to get rid of that texture. My matte medium's actually drying out too. I'm really taking my time with this one today. So all of my paint is drying out, my matte medium and everything. So I'm kind of looking at the center there, those petals in the center that we did first. And I'm feeling like it might not be bright enough. I might want to go back a little bit later and, you know, brighten it a bit. And I tell you that so that you understand that, you know, you're never done. You never have to settle and say, well, that's okay. I guess that part's just going to be darker than I want it. No way. We can come back later and totally change it. But I'm going to finish the rest of the painting before I decide. If I end up going back to, you know, kind of repaint that middle area, that first area, darken it a bit, I won't make you watch me do that. I'll be doing it the exact same way. Oh, there's Mr. Moon. Decided to paint with the studio door open today, so he's going to take full advantage of it. If you have an area where your highlight is too bright, and like I said, this deep violet is very transparent. So if you have an area where you just took that bright color down too far and the deep violet's not covering it, you can go ahead and, you know, maybe paint over in that super dark area with a little bit of diox purple, or even just black, and then come back and put the deep violet over top of it. Whatever you feel like you need to do. I know that these chalk lines are freaking some of you out. And there's probably even one or two of you who are really not happy with me leaving those chalk lines there so much, but it's really not a big deal. It's not something you need to worry about. See, as I get to that part, I just make sure to cover it up. And I'm almost not even looking at my reference image anymore. You know, maybe if there's a little part of my painting where I can't really tell, you know, what part of a petal a certain line belongs to, then I might glance at it for that. But as far as the highlight and the shadow colors, I'm really just kind of doing my own thing now. Might end up being pretty close. It might end up being totally different. Nice and dark right there, but if I can't get it dark enough, again, another way I'll make that appear darker is by popping the highlight on that edge. That's going to make that seem darker. And then when I was, you know, taking a break from this and kind of standing back and looking at it, I almost wished I had done purple, you know, done like a completely purple flower. Purple roses are really, really gorgeous too. So don't be confined by the colors that I'm using or the colors that you think you should use, or, you know, anything like that. Use whatever colors you like. I think I'm going to finish up the shadow in this area, and then I'm going to take a break and go back into the highlights a little. I'm going to leave that chalk line because that belongs to the edge of this petal, and I haven't done that one yet, so I'm just going to leave that little chalk line there for now. I keep thinking I'm going to go and start doing the highlights on these areas, but roses are so complex, you know, the shapes. One shape flows into the next, and I keep thinking, okay, that's good. I'm going to go ahead and do some highlights, and then I realize that I can't because I haven't fully put a shadow on everything that also needs a highlight. And I want to do the shadows before I do the highlight. This is one of those areas where it's almost completely black in my reference image. Fade it out right there. All right, now to do some highlights. I am still using my filbert because I'm working on some areas that are a little bit bigger than some of the highlighted areas that I did in the middle. I added a little bit of matte medium to that. And let's start with this edge here. Kind of break that up a little. Matte medium. And just break up that line. So I just realized that a couple of weeks ago I was having a live event with some of my people in Patreon, and we were talking about, you know, doing a painting without black. And we've done lots of paintings here without using black paint. And I asked if anyone had ever done a painting without using white paint. And I knew that I had done it before, but I couldn't think of any examples. But I guess now this is a good example, because I don't believe I'm going to be using any white paint in this painting. Let's get a hint of this down here. Very light pressure, see that? I'm almost not laying down paint, but trust me when I say I have a good amount of paint on this brush. If I put too much pressure, I would just deposit all of that orange paint all through here, and I don't want to do that. And I should probably move back to my number 3 round. Just want to get that edge on there. Now that I've got my brightest color on this edge, I love the way that it contrasts and stands up off of the rest of the flower from, you know, this darker edge here. Just really helps put some distance between those two petals. What I want you to do is really look at your image. I know that this can be kind of a challenging thing when you're newer to art, is really seeing the nuance in color in an image. You know, it's really easy to look at the image and say, oh, it's red, you know, but it can be difficult to look at it and say, oh, well, that red here changes a little bit and it's a little warmer, or it's a little cooler, or darker, or lighter, you know, whatever. So I really want you to look at your image and try to notice things like that, and try to see the way the slight variations in the color. I picked up just a little swipe of quinacridone there. The way the slight variations in color help you to see small movements in the shape. You know, whether it says that there's a very slight bend in the petal, or, you know, whatever it is, like right here. See how it's kind of darker right here, and then around it's lighter. So that lightness helps to say that's protruding forward, and this darker bit is kind of pressed down a little bit. So I want you to notice things like that in your image and play around with bringing those into your image. I'm just gonna define that a little bit more. There we go. All right, I am gonna go back to my number 3 round so that we can work on these areas that are a little bit smaller, a little bit more delicate than those 2 large petals that we were working on in the front. feel like I'm probably about done for the day. I feel like that's about all I've got for today. That's a good amount of work. We'll get rid of this chalk line for you. That nice bright edge. A little bit more of that, just the cat red by itself. This petal ended up a little bit darker than I feel like I want it, so I am probably going to go back in there with some quinacridone in a moment too. A matte medium. I'm just going to mix the quinacridone right into my brush there. I didn't clean it off. There we go. And then if I need to put my shadow back in, I can do that. Still that quinacridone mix here. Back into my oranges. We'll do the back half of that petal. Same color, I just went right into the quinacridone with it. A little matte medium. Roll off a good amount of that paint. And this is taking a little bit of light, but it's not as bright. Give that a crisp edge down this side. And let it fade into our shadow. Now you can see how it's coming along, and I'm feeling really happy about it. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back and fixing to continue. So I'm going to start on these two little petals here. I'm going to use my number 3. I'm going to get just a hint of my red and my quinacridone. But since you kind of know what I'm doing here, I may allow myself to kind of get lost in the process a little bit more and work just a little bit quieter and, you know, kind of find my little zen zone. I like that little zen zone. Whenever I get to a point where I do something a little different than, you know, the way I've done it on other areas, then I'll let you know for sure. I won't just clam up and leave ya. We'll just make sure that that shadow's nice and deep, so a little deep violet on a clean brush. I'm gonna try and keep it to a minimum, but I probably already said this, but it's worth repeating. I want you to understand that you can go back at any point and change things. You know, try something out, and if it doesn't work, go back later and just change it. So I didn't make that edge quite as bright as the other edges, and now standing back and looking at it, I want to. So I just put a hint of that orange in there. It didn't take much. It still has the effect that I wanted of not being overly bright, but I feel like it fits in a little bit better than it did now. And I'm going to go back to my number 8 filbert. I think I'm going to go into my Quin and Cad. A little heavy on the Cad, little matte medium. And we'll start laying this in, taking care of those chalk lines. Remember, the shorter your brush stroke, especially if they go in different directions, the less you're going to see those brush strokes. So rather than swiping back and forth like that, just kind of work in this little dash motion. I'm going to take that color down a little bit farther than where I actually want it to be highlighted, because that will give me room to bring my shadow up a little bit higher. Let's just keep with that same color mixture so we don't have to clean off our brush so often. And we'll get that up in here. Take care of that chalk line. Let's get a little more quinacridone and start transitioning into that shadow here. Let's just pump up the highlight with a little bit heavier of a cad red mixture. There's still just a hint of quinacridone in there. Some matte medium to really thin it down. And I feel like this area is going to be the brightest, but it's not going to be the highlight area. So I'm not going to put any of the orange in there. We'll just kind of dash that through here, nice and soft. Use some matte medium if you need to help break up brush stroke lines or get rid of texture, whatever. It's a little bit brighter also right here. And let's work on that edge. So my cad red, a little cad orange, just a little cad orange, and a little bit of matte medium. And let's see, that edge is right about here. Very faint right there. And right here where that's bent over, I'm just going to put some heavier pressure. A little more red. And then it kind of fades out. And we'll start laying in with a little matte medium, some of that brighter color up here. Not a ton. Let's get our deep dark shadow in there with that deep violet. Then we can move on to another area. I've really enjoyed taking my time with this one and, you know, doing it over the span of a couple of days, especially since, you know, it's fairly repetitive as far as the colors and, you know, the techniques. It is fairly repetitive. And I feel like for me anyway, doing it all in one sitting, I would be really bored with it and just over it by the time I was done. But doing it in little chunks helps me be excited about it. It helps me look forward to coming back to it. A little bit of purple and some matte medium. I want kind of a transparent color of this because I really like that in my image I can see the slightest hint of a shadow right in here that kind of moves up. Just helps give a little bit of dimension and kind of a curve to the flower, which is really nice. And I'm just going to put the slightest hint of it here because the quinacridone was just not strong enough. But I do have quite a bit of matte medium in there, so that deep violet is pretty transparent. Sharpen up that line a little. Right down in here. And let's move on to here. This one I feel like will be fairly simple. It's not all that bright. Just my quin-cad mixture and lay it in right where I feel like I've got some pretty decent light. We're pretty bright up on this top edge, so I don't think I need to really take this color in there. Just kind of laying it in here where I've got that mid-tone, leaving room for my shadow and leaving room for my highlight. It's not because I really have to leave room for them. It's just easier that way. Because if my paint is too thick, then I might pull it off when I go to try and paint over it later. If you wanted your colors to be a little bit closer to kind of that bright fuchsia type red in the reference image, I would say the best way to do that would be to glaze. You know, to kind of, like I said before about painting the flower in black and white and then glazing bright colors over it. If you wanted a bright, like a multicolored flower, I would probably recommend you do the same type of thing if you want this to be that bright fuchsia. Because, like I said, adding white to it really is just going to make it pastel. It's going to kind of make it look chalky. It's not really going to give you a bright, you know, kind of a hot color like what you see in the reference image. Doing just a little bit of scumbling with the tip of this brush. Pretty soon, this number 8 filbert will join the ranks of my other number 8 filbert that's been scrubbed to death. Let's get just a little cad red and quinacridone. I didn't clean off my brush. It still has a little bit of that orange in there. I just have a couple places where I need to kind of bridge the gap between those colors, clean up that line. Our petals folded over here. Kind of scumble it on into here a bit. Let those colors mix. little point of quinacridone. That's going to be a nice transition into our deep violet. Have you noticed as I'm painting this that the deep violet, when I apply it, it looks so purple. It looks like I have a bright purple shadow. But then if you look at other areas that I've already done the shadow on, they don't look bright purple like that. It's just the way the deep violet is. It changes. It gets darker and, you know, more transparent as it dries, which I already told you, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of that, because I know that if you have a bright purple shadow, some of you may get kind of upset about that and a little more quinacridone and panic and try and find a way to cover that up because you don't want a purple shadow. But I promise when it dries, it's not going to be bright purple. Just like that quinacridone, it looks pretty bright right now. I'm just throwing a little quinacridone in up here. Just kind of suggest a shadow. But that quinacridone will dry a little bit more transparent and less vibrant as well, especially because of the black underpainting. I think I'm going to take just a hint of this color, the Cad Red quinacridone mixture, with some matte medium, maybe a little bit more matte medium, quite transparent. I feel like I have this petal right in here, just a little dark, so I'm almost just glazing it on there. Because I don't want it to totally disappear in here. That's going to be almost black. Much better. More deep violet. Sorry if you can hear those jets. It seems like lately, whenever I want to record, the jets start flying overhead. So it gets kind of loud. Nice crisp edge right there. But as we move up, it's going to start to, that edge is going to soften. That's going to help us give the illusion of a petal that's kind of folded over. See right there how there's no hard line anymore? Still just that deep violet, kind of playing with the shadow here. And if I'm going to play with that shadow, I got to play with the highlight. This is absolutely one of those places I'm experimenting with the light and shadow. All right, I think we'll see how that looks once it dries. It'll probably change a little bit as it dries. So we'll move on to the next part. right, here's where it starts getting a little bit darker. So I'm still using that mixture, but I'm leaning it a little bit more on the quinacridone side. For the most part, I will have a little bit of the highlight color here. I hope that you're able to find a zen place in here. I'm getting a little bit of it, but ultimately I still have to keep you guys in mind and, you know, talk to you a bit. Let's actually pull a little more red in than that. It's not quite that dark just yet. Oh, this one actually goes all the way across. I don't know why I thought that I had a shorty there. There we go. If you wanted to do this painting for like a Valentine's Day card, that would be really, really fun. And you could easily grid this to a size for a card. Just like I said, use that blog post that I wrote. It's in the video description below. And with that, you should be able to grid any image to any size you like. It's really a pretty easy method. I struggled with writing that blog post for a little while because I wasn't sure how I was going to explain to you how to do the math for it. I know that not everybody likes math. I like math. I like math a lot, actually. But it did take some fairly complex math, you know, especially if you wanted to go into a strange size, like 11 by 14. You know, it totally changes from this aspect ratio to 11 by 14. I'm just putting in hints of this color here. This is mostly going to be shadow, but it's not going to be black. It's not going to be completely dark. So really just little hints of this color. It's mostly quinacridone. There's a hint of that cad red in it to kind of pop the color and make it not quite so transparent. Let's go ahead and lay in that shadow while we're here. I didn't clean off my brush. I just went right into that deep violet. Smooth it up into here. This area is quite dark. I know we kind of lost the petal that's folded over, but we'll get that back. See how bright that purple looks? But in a few minutes when it's dry, you'll notice it doesn't look that bright anymore. Now I'm taking the deep violet under here almost all the way up. In fact, I am going to take it all the way up to the edge of where this petal is folded over. But because the deep violet's so transparent and I have that quin red mixture there, you'll be able to see through it a little bit and you'll have a hint of that color. Let's pop that highlight a bit. Mostly cad red, just a hint of the orange because it's not quite as bright as other areas. We'll start that right up here. Super light pressure. Little matte medium. Little quin red, just to start kind of blending it back. Just love how all of these colors mix together. While we're over here, let's go ahead and do this larger one. This is going to be pretty much just a quin red mixture, heavy on the quin. Quite thin, little matte medium to thin it out again. Soft line back there. A little brighter right here on this edge. Maybe I'll throw just a hint more of my red in there for this edge. See how I was kind of rolling my brush just a little bit? It's okay if you can't tell the difference between those two areas there. This is just deep violet. So sometimes I stress myself out while I'm painting for you guys. And, you know, that's one of the reasons that I'm trying to have a little bit more of a kind of a meditative focus on painting this year is, you know, I don't want to stress out when I'm painting for you guys. One of the reasons that I think I stress myself out is, you know, I'm worried about my video being too long. And I know that we've talked about that before, and you guys have said, well, several of you have said that you would watch a 6-hour video. And that's very sweet, but I don't think you would. You know, I'm trying to tell myself that it's really okay. You know, don't rush through a painting. I tell you guys not to rush through paintings, but then sometimes I rush through it in an effort to, you know, have a little bit of a shorter video. But I figure, you know, you either like the painting or you don't. And if you like the painting, I'm sure that time is much less of an issue. You know, and you can always pause a video and come back to it. And especially if I'm telling you to take your time and to paint this over however long you need to. By the way, I'm still just using deep violet. I'm just kind of shadowing this outer edge here. If I'm telling you to take as long as you need to do this painting, then I can't rush myself. You know, I end up painting and thinking, oh my gosh, this is taking too long. They're gonna get bored. I need to hurry. And then sometimes I don't like my painting as much, you know, because I've hurried, I've rushed, I've stressed. So that's why you're seeing some videos that are a little bit longer right now, because I can relax into that a little bit more. You know, shorter videos make me feel a little bit rushed and panicked. And I think it's the same thing, you know, I think you'll find the same thing if you pick a longer video or a, you know, a more challenging tutorial, like I said before, and then give yourself time to work on it over days or hours or weeks or months, whatever you need. I think you'll feel a little bit more relaxed. So I need to remind myself that, you know, that it's okay to take my time. I'm going to pop a little highlight here, even though there's not one in my image. I feel like I want to see that. It's okay if I take my time, just like it's okay if I tell you to take your time. Right down here in this corner, I've already got a hint of that color there, so I cleaned off my brush. I'm just going to get some deep violet. Let's get rid of all this chalk and just fill in this area. Just kind of glaze that a bit. There we go. All right, we are almost done. We just have a few areas left, but I feel like you have a good understanding now of what it is that I'm doing. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to just kind of find my little meditative place and get in there. And if you're painting along, I hope that you can find that space as well and trust your intuition when you need to make decisions. That said, I will still be showing you what I'm doing. I won't be skipping anything. I just won't really be talking. So let's go ahead and finish up. just checking in with you to see how you're doing, whether you're painting along or whether you're just watching. And to remind you not to hold your breath. And that reminder is for me as much as it is for you. I tend to hold my breath when I'm really concentrating on a painting. So whenever I find myself holding my breath, I stop what I'm doing and I take a deep breath just to make sure, that I don't pass out. It kind of helps recenter you and get you back on track too. All right, there it is. And aside from a couple of touch-ups that I feel like I might or might not want to make, I'll give it a couple of days before I decide. I think I'm happy with it, and so I'm gonna sign it.